ทดสอบ1 2 3เราทดสอบ1 2 3ทดสอบเช็คเช็คเช็คเช็คเช็ค1 2 3 4
They Sawadee krab. Good morning and welcome back to Thammasat University International ELT Conference. This is the second day and the last day of our conference, organized by the Department of English and Linguistics, Faculty of Liberal Arts, Thammasat University. And this year's theme is under ELT in the Digital Age. We will start our day with our keynote speaker, who will be given a talk on the role of language corpora in a content and language integrated learning, CLIL, lesson. So let me give you a brief introduction of our speaker today. Passapong Sripicharn is Assistant Professor in the Department of English, Faculty of Liberal Arts, Thammasat University. He received his MA and PhD in Applied Linguistics from the University of Birmingham, UK. His main research interest is corpus linguistics, particularly the pedagogical applications of language corpora in vocabulary and writing classes. Recently, he has gained more interest in wider applications of language corpora, such as lexicology, terminology, translation, and critical discourse analysis. And he's now exploring uses of language corpora as a tool to term extraction and term base, or TB, and translation memory, or TM, that can be cooperated in computer-assisted translation, or CAT, or CAT as we know it. I would also like to emphasize, and we're proud to say this, that Dr.Passapong has recently received the Teacher of the Year award granted by Thammasat University. So please welcome the Teacher of the Year.
So thank you very much for the introduction. So first of all, I would like to thank the Department of English and Linguistics for organizing such a wonderful conference and kindly invited me. Actually, it's my own department here as well. So, but anyway, thank you so much for giving me a good opportunity to come and share what I'm interested at the moment. So, as you may know, my background is in corpus linguistics, and I've been using language corpora to teach my students, like in writing classes, and more recently in translation courses for so many years. But recently, I'm getting more interested in what they call the content language integration learning, or CLIL. First, for personal reasons, really, because now my daughter is attending like EP school, so she is taking like half of the subjects in Thai, and the teachers there, the school really was kind of like trying to have some parallel content in English as well, right? So I'm not quite sure if they could call that CLIL or not, in a strict sense, but that's why I'm getting more interested in this kind of approach. And I'm wearing another hat as well, as the academic affairs, kind of department. So we are now in the process of revising our curriculum. And then at the moment at our faculty, we have Thai kind of like regular programs, and then we have international programs, and they seem to be quite separated. But I see CLIL as an interesting option as well. So in regular kind of like Thai programs, we have some content subjects like at our faculty, we have psychology, geography, philosophy, library science, and specialized kind of subjects like that. And it would be, very interesting if we could adopt, this kind of CLIL or content-based approach in those content courses as well, right? So, but anyway, so I think most of you have, kind of like heard of CLIL at some points, right? But originally, as you may know, it started, like more or less in Europe, and then the kind of like the common context of this CLIL approach is still like in primary, secondary school, right? So to get started today, I just want you to have a look at a very short clip of how CLIL, lesson is kind of like operating in secondary school in an art lesson. In German-speaking kind of context, right? Können Sie Deutsch sprechen? I cannot now. So anyway, so we have a quick look together here.
Pamokoje kalbėsime truputėlį angliškai, truputėlį lietuviškai.
Or maybe just make it a bit louder.
My voice is really low. Screaming, yes? Repeat after me. Screaming. The next season, after spring, what colors are typical in the wood? Ruduo yra koksai metų, kuo jisai yra ypatingas? Spalvingas. Krenta lapai. Ir keičia lapai spalvas. Spalvingas, jau parašė. Šalta. Šlapia. Šalta. Šiandien jūs išmoksite naujus žodžius.
So you can see that at the
She tries to introduce the vocabulary in the target, in the language, which is English in this case, but still, and I think they're using some German as well, right? It's an art lesson, right? So basically they're talking about the things that they're going to use in this high class.
Jeigu jūs norėsite pasikeisti spalvą, jūs galite klausti, what color do you need?
So maybe you can't see this clearly, but what the teacher is trying to do here is to introduce not just the vocabulary of arts, but also the kind of languages that the student may have to use in operating the task as well. It's kind of like sample questions, requests, or some kind of the language that the students may need to interact with each other in the following, task. So we can skip a few parts.
I need clean water. I need clean water. I want to mix colors. I want to mix color. I finished my painting. I finished my painting.
So after the end of the introduction, kind of parts, the classes kind of like went on with like regular arts kind of practice or activity.
Today, we're going to have fun working with sunflowers. Yellow, brown, black, blue. It is that all.
Sorry for the technical problems, but during the class, the teacher kind of like walked around and then try to encourage the students to use more English, right? When they kind of help each other or try to brainstorm, like get some ideas about what to paint and what colors to use and things like that. And then at the end of the lesson, each student got to take turns describing their drawings or painting in English, right? So that's a kind of like what a CLIL lesson might look like. But of course, there are many types and applications of the CLIL lesson as well. So we can come back to that later. So, so going back to our context then. So if you look at the actual definition or the formal definition of CLIL, so the keyword here, I think, is what they call a dual focus education approach. So I think they pay attention to both language and content. So I think in this sense it differs from international programs because at international programs we just use English as the medium of instruction. That's all, right? And I'm not quite sure if like the EP program that we are having now can claim to be a CLIL lesson or not, because they seem to be they seem to have separate kind of focuses as well, right? In Thai math, they teach math in Thai, right? In English math, they just try to teach math in English, that's all. But the focus is still on the content, not the integration of language and content there, right? So I think the keyword is the kind of interwoven or the integration between these two elements there. And I think the most similar approach, when it comes to ELT, you may try to associate CLIL with content-based learning, right? So, but again, the literature suggests that they are not exactly the same, as you may see here, because in content-based language teaching, I think usually the language teachers would run those courses, right? But in CLIL lessons, it could be taught by either language teacher or subject teacher. Ideally, subject teachers who train themselves to be CLIL teachers. I think that would be the ideal situation, right? But language teachers can also be a CLIL teacher as well. But maybe teaching is preferred in that case because we don't know the content subject a lot, right? But we can be part of the lesson as well, either before at in the preparation stage, or we can coexist. We can be present in the CLIL classroom as well, right? But I think the last point here this is very important because in content-based learning, you seem to focus on language knowledge, not content knowledge, right? You may have some reading passages like in geography or psychology, but again, the purpose is to introduce vocabulary, to teach reading skills, getting meaning from context and things like that. Is still language, type of oriented. But see the CLIL lesson. We focus on both content and language at the same time. And the language we are focusing on is more like the language that the students can use to operate tasks there. It's a language that is very specific to the genre or to that kind of text type. It's a vocabulary that's very key to that kind of subject area and all the other functions that would be very context or domain specific there. And if you talk about research in CLIL, I think most of the research or studies now seem to kind of like reports, the cases or the applications of CLIL or share CLIL experiences in different settings, right? The focus or the majority or the mainstream of the research is still very heavily based in Europe. Although now in Australia, right, or even in Asia, like in Vietnam, or even in Thailand, I think we have used more and more CLIL, right? It's not very new in Thailand anymore because if you search, if you Google it, right, you can see lots of clips, like teacher training clips based in Thailand, or the fourth-year student of the education department who have to do the practical, right? They use CLIL quite a lot in Thailand as well, and also PhD candidates now have conducted research in CLIL now. Like I know one like Asst who's doing very comprehensive study of this, right? So CLIL is not very new in Thailand, Anyway, if you look at research that's kind of like more empirical research or research that tries to prove the effectiveness of CLIL, I think we should need more studies like that, right? So there might be a few studies that reported or measured the effects of CLIL on learner proficiency or performance in general, and I think the research that is most relevant to what I'm going to talk today is research into the effects of CLIL on learners' lexical proficiency and in other aspects in applied linguistics. Because you may know that corpus linguistics, I think it cannot do everything in language teaching, right? I think the strength still lies in lexical analysis and things like that. So I think research into the effect of CLIL on lexical proficiency is more relevant to what we are doing here. And the direct, kind of application of Corpora in CLIL lessons have been reported, but mostly in European setting as well, right? So, like in teacher training, because in Europe, I think they're operating more like multi-lingual environments. So the kind of Corpora that they use are more like lingual Corporas, and they use this kind of multilingual Corpora to teach the subject content in more like interpretation or in education, like teacher training. And then this is one of the studies that reported positive results, right, of the use of corpus data in a CLIL lesson. And of course, as you may expect, the positive effect is very heavily focused on the ability to use collocation, to use typical collocation, to be aware of collocation validity or naturalness, right, in the target language, which is English. And then in another study, and then you can see the kind of corpora that they use for like multilingual, like English, German, French, Polish, Turkish, and this is for teacher training purposes. And one of the positive results that kind of like were reported here in this study is the learners' ability to have like their own inquiries, learn autonomy and collaboration. And later on, when we talk about an approach called EDL or disruptive learning, which is very much associated with the use of Corpora, so we can see how these approaches, together with the kind of like awareness of content knowledge, can help learners, right, to gain more autonomy as well. So now we are moving to a more kind of like practical issue, right? If you haven't done this before, right, if you want to try to do it, some experts in CLIL have suggested like 6 stages for creating a CLIL lesson, right? Very simple. First, you have to have a shared vision for CLIL. This is more like internal setting, right? I mean, I think you have to start talking to subject teachers, to content teachers, and then say, okay, now we are going to develop a CLIL lesson. I need your help, and you might need my help as well, right? So this is kind of like a shared vision there. And then you might have to, with the help of the subject or the content teachers, you may have to start analyzing and personalizing the CLIL context there, right? Like for example, the case study that we are going to use today is more like in psychology, and I think that it's a huge area, right? So I think you have to try to see which or what kind of aspect in psychology, what kind of aspect in languages related to psychology would fit in the context or the pedagogical context that we are using. And then, of course, it's like other material have development, you have to plan, right? Prepare for the units, and then you implement it, you deploy it, and then you monitor, kind of like make some changes, getting feedbacks from the peer teachers and from the students as well. And then the last step that they suggest is more like opening up a little bit, more like K-8 on knowledge management. So once it's successfully implemented in your school, you may want to share the ideas to the community and establish, kind of CLIL-based community as well. Okay, as we are going to use Corpora, right? Try to suggest the role of Corpora in this kind of stages. So I think maybe we just focus on planning, the planning stage, which is the third step here today. And we can see how language Corpora can actually play a part in helping teachers, both content and language teachers, to prepare a corpus-based CLIL kind of material. Okay, the planning stage itself can be subdivided into smaller kind of like stages as well. So first, you have to decide on the content. So for example, this is taken from one of the textbooks in CLIL, and the case study here is more like the environments, right, or the ecology. So first, you and the content or the subject teacher have to decide on the focus, because you can't cover all the subtopics there, right? So for example, we decide to focus on the types of habitats, animals in the habitats, for example, right? And this simple mind mapping technique can be used when we discuss with the language, with the content teacher as well. And in CLIL philosophy, they just don't focus on content or language, but they are looking into a kind of like the higher level of thinking as well. So they want to focus on the cognitive skills as well. When the students have to keep balance between language and content, I think there might be some higher level skills that are needed for the students as well. So that's why the language and content teachers have to agree or have to help designing or determining the kind of cognitive, kind of or domain that would be the targets of the lesson, right? So for example, to be able to cover all the content areas that have been identified in the last slides, maybe we have to help the students to be able to explain something as well, right? To carry out some investigations, to start to go through some of the scientific processes of hypothesizing or proving the hypothesis and things like that, and getting a handle on kind of like making some connection between like logical relation, like cause and effect and things like that. But this is the most important stage, right, in planning a unit. So once the content areas and the cognitive domains have been decided, I think this would make CLIL lesson different from international programs or content-based, because we teach language at the same time as we teach content as well. So we have to be very, very carefully deciding the kind of language or languages that we want to use. And in literature, they suggest 3 types of languages there to be used in a CLIL lesson. The first one is called the language of learning. The second type is the language for learning. And the last one is called language through learning. Right? So let me give you some examples. The language of learning, of course, is the kind of specialized, linguistic aspects of that subject matter or that topic, right? So, for example, in ecology, right? So you have to identify key vocabulary and phrases, and the students have to, learn how to, or at least notice or acknowledge the use of some grammatical patterns like modal verbs, try to predict the future of the ecosystem. And of course, they might have to use some kind of like conditional tenses, right? Or cause-effect solutions that suggest that when they discuss the issue in ecology, for example. So that's language of learning. And then they need language for learning as well, right? So maybe this getting away a little bit from the actual specialized vocabulary or grammar, but it's a kind of language needed to operate in the English-speaking classes as well, right? But they have to be able to ask questions, to respond to questions, to give comments, right? To argue sometimes, to debate sometimes, and production, kind of like step as well. Because at the end of the lesson, like in the art lesson that we just looked at, the student may have to report like orally, or they have to write something, right, in English as well. So the kind of generic, kind of language use needed for those parts should be introduced to the student as well. And then the last type, language through learning. This is a kind of like looking to the future, something that is beyond what's going on in the class, right? So we believe that if CLIL process is completed or is successful, the students can of course pick up language of learning, right? They learn more and more terminologies in the fields. They can use language for learning, right? They can do tasks in English more and more, right? And then at the end of that lesson, or even in long term, we believe that the students may have developed some systematic way of learning languages as well. Not just English, but maybe some other languages as well. Right? So for example, they'll be able to use resources like dictionaries, or in this case, they'll be able to browse, like language Corpora more independently. And then of course, they might, be learn, how to give a very good presentation in English to be used in other courses too. And of course, right, this is not compulsory. In some cases, you might be able to raise some like cultural issues, intercultural issues, right, and critical kind of like issues as part of the CLIL lesson as well. But that may not be our focus today. Right now, so the rest of the presentation would be about corpus linguistics now, right? So I think most of you have used it at some point or are quite familiar with language corpora now. So I might go quite fast here. So for those of you who are very new to corpus linguistics, when we talk about corpus, we are talking about a kind of collection of texts, authentic texts like from newspapers, or it could be the scripts, right, or transcripts of oral interaction in classroom. And then, but the key thing is that all the text that you are collecting, so should be saved, stored in an electronic format, usually in a plain text, because we might need special software to play something with it, right? So that's why the definition of corpus linguistics is more like having three keywords. We are collecting naturally occurring text, not teacher-made or artificial text, and the text we are collecting should be processed, right, by computer. And then, of course, we need some kind of corpus analysis software to help us analyze it. And software that we are going to talk about today is called ANCON, right? I think most of you have used it before. So ANCON is a kind of like corpus processing software that is developed by a professor in Japan. So you can visit this website, and then you can download I think it's free for educational purposes. So what ANCON can do, right? And I think most corpus analysis tools can do. First of all, if you upload your data, right? You can see on the left-hand side of the screen here. If you upload your data, in this case, we are collecting the text from psychology, and the very specific area in our class today is for like teen depression. I think teachers now have depression anyway, right? But I think when we teach about depression, I think it would be nice like to have a kind of like collection of text And when we talk about the corpus in this context, I think there are many types of corpus that can be used to teach this topic of teen depression. So the first type is what we are using here. I mean, you can collect the kind of like text that the students have to read in the course, the textbooks in the courses, that can form a very nice pedagogic corpus. And then if you have more time, right, when the classes go on, you can actually collect the writing that the students produce, homework or assignments. That could be a part of your CLIL, corpus as well. And then you might record the speaking or oral activities in the classes, and that could be part of your corpus, the spoken corpus as well. And then you may look at the model, or the target kind of model. If the students are going to write a report or academic text in teen psychology, for example, you might collect like articles in journals that are going to be like good model for the student as well, and that might form the kind of corpus as well. So, but here in this presentation, the corpus that we are using is just a collection of the texts that the students are expected to read. And once you upload your text there, this kind of software would analyze your data, and then they can generate what we call word lists according to the frequencies of the word that they found in your data. Right? So, okay, now I will stop talking a little bit, right? And I might ask you to do something to warm you up a little bit. You got the handout here, right? So, I mean, the first task, can you spend like 1 or 2 minutes doing this? Maybe by your own or with someone sitting next to you. So this is the kind of warm-up activity that you can do with your students as well. Because as you can see, when we talk about the language of learning, we are going to familiarize the students with key phrases or technical vocabularies in the area, right? So what you could do is, you might ask the students to think about what the students might feel to be the key terms or the technical words or phrases in the area, and they can make their own list. And then you can ask them to play with the computer, or you could prepare this kind of material for the students. You can ask them to compare their lists, and the list generated by software like Anton, right? So if you can spend like maybe 1 minute, just imagine that you are students, and then the class is psychology, and then today's lesson is on teen depression, right? So if we talk about the very, very special topic of depression in teenagers, so what kind of words or phrases you might expect to come across, maybe in the reading passages, right? That we are. Don't worry, I think they are making extra handouts now, right? But you can just do it on any pieces of paper at the moment, because you can follow some of the guidelines from the screen anyway. So I apologize for the handouts. So I think they're having like more handouts coming in a minute. Okay, so while we are doing this, so let me just talk a little bit about some of the other tools that you may make use of, right? But if you have already used this tool, so you can just keep on working on your own task, right? So apart from the word list here, software like Anapon can actually create a list of phrases as well, not just single words, right? So for example, if you think the word depression is one of the keywords, you can type the word depression, and the software can generate what we call bundles or clusters as well, right? So for example, 2 or 3 kind of bundle with the word depression on. So the language of learning could be expanded from single words to bundles or to lexical phrases or lexical items there. And you may notice that the word list sometimes doesn't make any sense, right? Because it seems to make a list of common words like and, to, of, right? So that's why sometimes you might have to use another tool to try to get rid of some of the common words. So that's why we call Keynote, tool. So it just works on statistical, type of basis. So basically, the computer would compare the main corpus, which is the teen depression corpus, right? And then they would compare it with a more general reference corpus, like a bigger general corpus, and then they use that stat, kind of like embedded stat tool, like correlation kind of stat, to try to suggest only the terms that are very frequent in your corpus, but not very frequent in the other corpora, in this case, in comparison with the reference corpus, right? So when you see the keyness list, it looks better, right? So all the key terminologies pop up in the top 10, top 20 list a little bit more. And one of the most important tools is called concordance, right? I think you know concordance now. So basically, when you type a word, software like this would generate what they call concordance lines, so which are the examples of a word or a phrase with left and right context. And then they will present it in a way that users can easily observe the pattern, right? So when you read concordance lines like that, you have to make sure that the students know how to read and interpret this kind of line as well. So we don't read continuously like that, but we try to read like this, right? We try to look down on either side of the keyword. So for example here, the students can see the context of the word depressed, and then they can kind of like make a list of some of the phrases related to the word, the adjective depressed as well, like depressed plus noun, like depressed teen, or the verb like feel depressed, for example. Okay, going back to your task, right? So, I mean, if you are using with students, you may ask some volunteer to come to the front, maybe and play with the computer, like try to run a word list and keywords, list based on this team age, depression kind of corpus. And then you can see that when you look at the top 30 frequent words, right? Top 30 most frequent words in the word list. You can see that just only some content words are relevant or are important, right? Like the word depression, which seems to be the core vocabulary or the topic of this lesson. And then you have some grammatical words, right? And then you have some lexical or content words like suicide, but they might not be very helpful. I think that's why you have to teach the students to run keyword analysis as well, right? So, okay, just to support that, the students are successful in creating keyword lists, and you can see that now. I think they can compare, their self-generated list with the list generated by the computer. It doesn't mean that these words are more important than the students' list, right? But I think it just makes sure that the students don't miss, any key terminologies that they will be reading or they might be writing about in this subject matter here, right? So you can see what the depression, teens, suicide, teenagers, parents. So they have the concept, all right? And then in the next task, you might not have time to do it, but you can use it with your students too. I mean, once we have a list of key phrases or keywords like that, you can, I mean, even yourself, if you are a language teacher and you don't know much about psychology, I mean, you don't know much about teenage depression, but as a language teacher, I think you can use some of these phrases to try to form like some kind of conceptual network as well, so you know roughly what's going on in this very, very specialized topic there, right? So, for example, if you have a look at on the handout here, actually they are the same kind of like words from the screen. You can see that you can easily form like basic concept in teen depression, right? So because of all the keywords, talk about the causes of depression or the factors that might have led to teenage depression, and then the symptoms like bipolar, right? The causes would include like drugs, alcohol, abuse, and things like that. And then they have we have some words that are about symptoms or consequences like sadness, bipolar, suicide, right? And then you have words that can cluster in terms of the remedy or the solution as well, like medication, therapy, behavior, and things like that. Right, so that task has to form the very solid foundation for the next activity as well, because at least yourself as a language teacher and the students who might be like psychology major, but for this specific topic, right, they might not have the overall concepts or network, like conceptual network of the topic that they are going to study. So I think these activities could be very, very helpful for both teachers and the students in the area as well. So if you look at task 3, for example, so this could be some kind of like language focused activity, right? So as a language teacher, this is your role, right? Maybe after the subject teachers have discussed some of the content matters, like consequences or solutions or suggestions to teenage depression, you as a language teacher could have this kind of lexical analysis activity with the student as well, right? So again, they can make use of all these functions there, like word list, keyword list, the cluster, right, analysis that generate like phrases and lexical bundles, and they can just do this simple task of filling up the table like that based on the corpus data there. So it raises awareness of the word formation, right, which is a complicated linguistic concept as well as like building vocabulary in the production kind of process as well. Right, you can see that the cluster analysis can be used to introduce some of the useful phrases to the students, and then to complete this kind of task, like task number 3 here as well. And then when the students are more familiar with reading, interpreting corpus data like concordance lines, you may challenge them a little bit, right? I mean, you may ask them to try to do some kind of like complicated generalization of language patterning as well, right? So for example, you may notice that most of the keywords even the word list, right? You can see that in psychology, or in particular the reading passages or the reading text that the students are going to read, I think there are quite a lot of instances or occurrences of grammatical words like and, to, of, or in, right? And but you might think that they're not very important, they're just grammatical words, right? But I think part of the language of learning is the awareness of some of the style or unique technique that is associated with that subject matter, right? So for example, if you look at concordant slides for these grammatical words, right, you may see that they might not function as grammatical words, but I think they have special functions in the domain of psychology as well, right? So for example, let me show you what the program, the software looks like a little bit. Right, so if you type or ask the student to type the word and, for example. Right, you might not see this clearly, but again, right, you can ask the student to carefully look at the left and the right, hand side of the keyword and, right? So the students know that and is a common, like linguistic, like marker of a connector, right? They know basic grammar, like usually part of speech are parallel and things like that. But again, right, in psychology, if you read or if you, kind of like look into the kind of lexical relation between words on either side of the word and, for example, right, you might have some interesting observation like this as well, right? So for example, and doesn't mean just and, or addition marker, right? But in teen depression kind of text that the student have to work with, right? It's more like, the word and is more like the center of what we call field-related depression as well, right? Like child and adolescent psychiatry, teen and adolescent depression. So it doesn't really mean and, like in that sense, but it's a kind of like, it's a fixed kind of expression, a very, very like jargon or terminology, part of the terminologies in the field as well, right? And I think it signals a very close semantic relation, maybe a little bit more, obvious than the other similar domains, right? Or in general English. So there are lots of phrases like abuse and bullying, or treated and dealt with, right? Feeling that, depressed. I mean, if you judge this in writing, for example, you might feel that it's quite redundant, right? So why do you have to say that? Why do you have to say feeling that and depressed, negative feedback and criticism, treated and dealt with, right? So there's more like near synonym or the words that have very, very close lexical connection. But maybe this, right, you have to be sensitive because we have limited data here, but maybe it's in the style of writing, right? In the style in psychology, right? If you have psychologists here in this room, so you can correct me if I'm wrong. Maybe it's a little bit over generalization now, but at least corpus data might raise awareness, right, of some of the subtle differences between the very, very domain-specific area like psychology, where and could function, could have a little bit of extra function there as well. Or the last one, right? If you read it carefully, you will come across a lot of concordant slides that imply, some burden on parents, right? Like your child and your family, right? It's an emphasis on this kind of connotation going on. Your child and your family, you have to do something. They're depressed, right? They are going to kill themselves. So you and your team, must do something. So you and your family. So there's lots of concordant slides like this if you search as a keyword, right? And then if you look at either sides of the keyword. And if you do the same with to, sorry, because we are running out of time. So if I'm doing the same with to, right? and you type the word to, and then Anton generates concordance line for the word to. You can see that the word to here is very much linked with larger patterns, right? And those patterns have some kind of the semantic trend where usually negative, right? So I think that follows the concept of semantic closely and things like that quite well, because you've got some phrases like brought harm to a family, right? Painful to a teen, prone to something, and then some of these patterns related to the word to actually suggest or signal some kind of possibility as well, right? So more likely or tendency. You may expect that in science or medical science, you have to be exact, right? But I mean, when you go through all these texts, you might see that in psychology, for example, maybe when they report or when they discuss data, maybe they can be more tentative, or use more hedging and things like that than we usually expect. And of course, right, some patterns are related to urgency or solution seeking as well, which is very domain or topic specific here. Okay, the last point I just want to raise before we bring this to conclusion. So, for example, if you look at your handouts, task. Okay, task 5. I think we just talked about task 4 already, right? The deep investigation of some grammatical words that may not just function as grammatical words, right? But they have like very, very special semantic connection as well. Task 5, I think maybe this is the most controversial kind of task, because some people don't believe that language Corpora could give you a lot of content knowledge, right? Because the context are quite limited. But again, if you have some kind of like, if you learn how to search, like if you type the word define as, or what is, right? Or words like that, you might have definitions of the word and part of the components, line as well, right? But maybe it's less obvious at the other functions. So we are talking about task 6 now, because so far we have talked about the use of specialized corpus, like teenage depression kind of corpus here. But when you want to raise the awareness of the language, the second part, you remember language for learning, right? The language that they use to process the tasks, like doing group work, pair work. I think we can move away from a specialized corpus to a little more general corpora as well, right? So for example, this is the kind of task you might do with a little more advanced learners. You might present them with like 2 sets of concordances. The first set, these concordances, are taken from the corpus called the academic spoken corpus by Michigan University. It's a collection of spoken data in academic context, like presentations like this, or discussions in like college, kind of settings there, right? So you can have access to this website anyway and search, and then get concordance in the way that you use standalone software to do it. And then, right, this is what we call notice the gap in second language acquisition sense, right? So you ask the students to compare, right, between the used by native speakers and the used by maybe less proficient. I mean, even concept of native speaker is makes you feel uncomfortable. So you might look at this in terms of the more proficient, less proficient learners, right? So you can see, for example, if you type the word I think, right, you can see that non-native speakers or less proficient students seem to be quite formal about the way they use this phrase, right? It is followed by that clause quite a lot. It looks like written language, right? More than spoken language. But if you flip over to the next page, when you look at the concordance lines produced by more proficient learners or native speakers, you can see that the phrase I think that might be a very useful phrase in operating the task, right? Because in this kind of lesson, you may ask the students to actually suggest how to help their friends who have depression and things like that. So words that signal opinions or suggestions may be very important to this activity, right? So the word I think, right, if the students can learn how to read and interpret these concordance lines, so they may see that actually there are more varieties of patterns related to the word I think used by more proficient speakers, then they might try to use some of those as well in their production. Okay, to sum up, I think I would encourage you or maybe your colleagues, right? If you are if they can have involvement in kind of like subject matter or in the kind of like subject courses or content courses like psychology to try to use more language corpora in those lessons. As I can, as I said, it might be corpora collected from the student production, from the model text, right? Like reading passages, textbook, or the model writing pieces of data like journal articles and things like that. Or it could be a combination of specialized corpora and more like general corpora like the Michigan academic corpus that we just looked at, right? One of the reasons why we should try to use this because the use of language corpora itself is more associated with what we call data-driven learning, right? And we believe that is a kind of deductive learning that would help the students to be more aware of the target language and the things that they observe, right, would stay with them, right, in long term. And there's some research supporting that kind of retention, generalization as well. So they observe authentic data. They might ask, have their own questions and try to find the answer to their own question. So the use of corpus data in CLIL settings could operate under this methodology of DDL or data-driven learning methodology as well. And there's some pedagogical implications. So for example, I think you have to be very careful about corpus compilation as well, right? Because sometimes your corpus may be too small, and then they might not represent all the kind of language or for and through, right? Learning that are key kind of like types of languages in a CLIL lesson. So, and then I think you might not have to stick to one particular type of corpus. So you can try to use varieties of corpora, right? Both written and spoken data, both general and specialized corpora, right? And if you are operating in multilingual kind of environments, you might be able to use like Thai, English, Japanese, German, right? At the same time as well. And then of course, we need some corpus training, right? So in particular, if subject teachers are not familiar with language corpora and the software, maybe you have to arrange workshops or training for them as well. And then grading and sequencing tasks are important, right? So you may start from like basic brainstorming tasks like that, right? And then have like cut and paste kind of tasks, right? Look at the keyword list and then chop, pick up the words and fill in the table. And then at the end of the extreme kind of like complexity, you may ask the student to jump directly into concordance line like that and learn how to observe patterns and the context there. And as far as CLIL is concerned, I think that's kind of like a dilemma or some confusion, right? Whether we should teach a subject in another language or through another language, right? So if we teach a subject in a language, so maybe we are doing the same as what people do in international programs and EP programs, right? We just teach math in English, but the focus is still in maths, right? But if we teach a subject through another language, I think we are teaching content and language at the same time. And it's a type of language that is not just the words, but it's a language that students will use to operate the task, right? And then it's a long-term kind of strategy that they can use, like looking up words in dictionary or observing concordance like in a corpus like that. And of course, right, we need some training with teacher development of CLIL teachers, because if sometimes content teachers may not have confidence to teach or even to co-teach with us in English or in another language, right? So I think maybe you have to help them as well, right? To try to develop their language. I mean, the content teachers' language proficiency as well, right? So and then you need collaboration before, during, and after the lesson as well, right? Between language teachers and the content or subject area teachers. And of course, I think more and more empirical research is needed, right? If you want to argue more strongly that this kind of corpus-based CLIL approach would not just be fun for students, but it can actually, increase some kind of proficiency, especially the lexical proficiency within the strengths of course linguistics in particular. And then you might try to different subject areas and pedagogical content and practices as well. So I'm going to try this myself because when we write the curriculum, I might try to ask some psychology teachers, geography teachers to try to teach their regular content subject in English, right? And then I might be around in the classes, and then we will see how it works or not. And that will be the next phase of research, of my research in this area. So, I'm not sure if we have time for comments or questions or not, but if you have any further comments, or if you want to have the file of this PowerPoint presentation, you can just send me an email. So that's my Thammasat email. So if you want to give some feedback to this presentation, or if you want to share your experiences, or if you have conducted research, right, in this area, so maybe you are in a better position, right, to share the results of this write to me here. And then if you want the presentation file, I can send it to you. Thank you very much.
Unfortunately, we don't have time for our Q&A sessions. May I please call upon Assistant Professor Dr. Sripicharn, Head of the English Department, to present a token of appreciation to our keynote speaker. Thank you very much. The coffee break is until 10:15. Note that after the break, the talks will be in two rooms, room 301 and 302. 301 and 302.